well, if you're going to have 6 months to make up for those deferred payments, the question is whether or not you really owe for that, or whether or not, put another way, whether or not the force majeure clause within your contract would relieve you from the obligation to pay rent. And I've read, to date, probably 8 or 9 of those now from various clients. And what I'm finding is that it's kind of including but not limited to language. It's very broad. It used to be, well, it's an earthquake or a flood or a this or a that. It's very specific things. But generally what I'm finding is, an act of God is usually the opening, and then they say including but not limited to. So I think there's a real question about whether or not this would fall under a force majeure clause. And if it does fall under a force majeure clause, then basically legally, the question is, legally, it would be that you don't owe the rent for that period of time while this is going on. So is that clear? I just want to make sure I'm not.
Yes, you have to pay it back, but you don't have to pay it back for those 6 months.
Yeah, well, and that's a question. That's a legal question, and there could be arguments on both sides. On the landlord side, for sure, they can be doing it. On the tenant side, for sure. So I just want to flag that, and it is something. And one of the reasons that it's also important to do that is a lot of these force majeure clauses have like a notice provision. I mean, on one hand, we all know what's going on. It's something that's very widespread, but a lot of the times the particular contractual provision will require that you give notice, that there be some form of notice that's given, along with some estimate of like the amount of time that this is going to continue. So, I'd encourage you or the people that you work with to go through and just take a look at those force majeure, read the language, and then get some consultation about what that means legally. And as in most things in the law, it's arguable. And at bare minimum, it could become a point of negotiation between you and your landlord. You could say, well, look, I think this is kind of covered by force majeure. And the landlord could say, well, I really don't think so. And depending on that, you might enter into negotiation and agree to kind of split the baby in the middle or do whatever. But a lot of my clients are just the landlords seem to be under the assumption that all the rent is due and it's 100% due and there's no offsets. And this includes other presentations that I've heard from the state level down to the local level. The starting point is that, of course, the rent is owed for all that time. So I would just flag that and say that's not a given. That's not something that's set in stone. So
Robert, we have a question from Ron.
I've figured out how to raise my hand.
Your virtual hand.
My virtual hand. So Robert, interesting just question. And first of all, I agree with you. From what you're saying, it sounds like, obviously one should always read their contract, take a look at it, and, get information, professional help if needed, either legal or a psychologist. But
during these times, yeah.
But some extremely simple lease agreements may not even have it in it. But my understanding is force majeure is a common law theory. So if it's not in a contract, should one still send a note saying, hey, because of what's happening, we're invoking force majeure, and we'd like to talk to you about what that means, that we don't feel at this point we can, not only do we must we pay it, but we physically can't or fiscally can't pay it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right to point out common law. What what this is, and it's a closely related concept. There's a contractual legal theory called impossibility. It's impossible for me to do the thing that I promised to do. So force majeure is kind of almost like a subspecies of impossibility. So the way that this would shake out like an actual litigation is that, the landlord would file an unlawful detainer action, to get you out. And then you would raise that as a defense. So I know on both sides of it, if I were representing, the landlord side, I'd be saying, well, you would look to the four corners of the contract and there isn't a force majeure clause in there. And we could have put one in had we wanted one in, but we didn't put one in. So there isn't one. So there isn't one in there. But Ron, I think I would tend to argue the other way, that it is a common law principle. And I would just say, Your Honor, impossibility is an we have a government shutdown order saying that you can't do business at that location. So I would say, yes, Ron, that even if it isn't in there, just on the common law principle of impossibility, I would put it in. And I would kind of flag that a lot of force majeure litigation tends to focus on whether or not it was really physically impossible. But here it's almost the perfect situation because you have a shutdown order. You have a complete shutdown order. So it seems like that would be a more viable argument. Another way that these gets argued on the other side is that this applies to everything except for the obligation to pay money, right? So for the landlord, if I have to open up the building or anything, but hey, it's impossible for me. But yeah, this force majeure doesn't apply to just the strict act of paying money. So those are typical defenses, counter arguments in force majeure cases where the other side will say, well, your only obligation is to pay me money. And the government shutdown is not forcing you to not pay me money. It might create an inability for you to pay money, but it's not an impossibility. So those are all things that would actually get litigated out. So Ron, in answer to your question, yes, I think regardless of whether or not a client had one of those in there, I would certainly want to be discussing that with the landlord, even if it's a negotiated, and the other, not to tag onto this, but in this crisis, a lot of it is that we have to do everything that we can, and we can maybe get a little bit of relief here, a little bit of relief in a lot of different places can actually help us get through. So it might not be one big thing that helps us, like, getting a huge check from the federal government. I don't think that's going to happen, or even the local government. But if you can get a little bit of relief, even with the deferred payments, but if you're not paying for 6 months of not, or however many months it is, if you can cut that in half and you can trim that down, anything that you can do is going to be helpful. So yes, Ron, I'd definitely be raising it regardless of whether it's in or whether it's out. I might want to call it impossibility instead of force majeure, but the concepts are very similar.
I happen to be both a tenant and a landlord. And, therefore I can see both sides. But at the same time, I think that the best way is to negotiate with whoever the tenant is or the landlord is. Otherwise, the only beneficiaries will be the attorneys and the legal system, and the landlords and the tenants will get lost.
Yes, I hope I didn't lose. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I can make a whole lot more money in my practice. I love trying cases. I work for big firms, and that was the focus of my practice. And now, after moving to Alameda, I see that if your clients are in court, you've already failed, right? Because it's a very expensive thing on both sides. So I'm not saying that this is something that you can raise and like, that's it, I'm not paying anything, I'm going to stand on it, because that could get very expensive for both sides. Similarly, in a lot of these contracts, there's an attorney's fees provision in there, so that it's kind of, it becomes a gamble. It's an all or nothing. Either you're going to win it or you're going to lose it. And if you lose it, you're going to also lose attorney's fees. So I think it's a point of negotiation. I think it's something that you should be talking about. And on both sides, you can say, well, you can evaluate that. Landlord could say, well, based on this language, I think it's clear that it doesn't relate to just the obligation to pay, so I'm not going to give you that much leeway. But if there's a real question, it's certainly a point of negotiation. Are any other questions on this particular one? Okay, then the next area that I've been pointing out to a lot of my clients, and now this is already generating lawsuits, is business interruption insurance. So if you're a business owner, a lot of times you have your premises liability policies, you have this type of a thing. And a lot of the time, some clients are not even aware of it, right? Because a lot of times the insurance agent will just kind of, oh, you want this standard package. And especially for retail operations, less so than, if you just have an office, it tends to focus just on premises liability. But if you're a retail business or a restaurant or other thing you open to the public, you should look at your insurance policy and see if you have business interruption insurance. And similar to the force majeure clause, a lot of the times the business interruption, there's several different species of coverage for various things. So business interruption insurance is definitely, you should be looking at your policy, talking to your insurance agent, and seeing if you have coverage for that. Ask them for the deck page to just go over what different types of coverage you have. And a lot of clients are pleasantly surprised to see that they do have at least something that's called business interruption insurance. So not surprisingly, and this is not to disparage all insurance companies, but not surprisingly, there are many people, small business owners that did apply for business interruption insurance. And again, this is something that you want to be doing away, because just like force majeure, there's kind of a notice provision sometimes folded into those. For your insurance, there are usually, time limits or suggested times where you need to be submitting a claim. So look at your business interruption insurance, see if you have the coverage for that. And I would encourage everybody, to the extent that you have it, that's why you bought it, that's why you paid for it, that's what those premiums are for, put in a claim. So there are already numerous lawsuits on this based on denials from insurance companies that this would qualify or be a triggering event for business interruption insurance. So nothing controlling yet, because a lot of the courts have been shut down. It's a kind of slow moving, but and on some of the other calls that I've been on the state level with Gavin Newsom and the others, there have been questions aimed at whether or not the state insurance commissioner is going to start doing anything about this, because the denials are already coming in for these claims for business interruption insurance. And usually the way that it gets policed is through what they call bad faith insurance denial lawsuits. So if you get a denial from your insurer and it's kind of just completely off base, and they're just doing it because they know it's hard to get an attorney and hard to force them to actually pay the money. If the attorney goes in and files suit and wins and the coverage is there and the judge rules, yeah, you should have paid that claim and you denied it in bad faith, well, then they're punitive damages, attorney's fees, the whole thing. So obviously, during this crisis, a lot of those law firms have a new line of business now, and they're out there and saying, hey, look, if you have business interruption insurance and you submitted a claim and you were denied by your insurer, you should sign up, with us. So this is a very active area right now in the law. Okay, I'm seeing a question. So any questions? I think that's good enough. Any questions on that?
Here's one that said, I didn't see business interruption on my liability policy. What would I even put as a claim if I don't know what the loss actually will be?
You would, I believe, and this is how I would structure it. If you think that you have an arguable claim, and I don't know, like if you're looking through your liability policy, I don't know if you're looking through like the declaration page, because usually there's a page and they go over all the various coverages and limitations that you have. So sometimes clients will go to their policy and read the policy and say, well, I don't see it mentioned anywhere in here. But what you really need to be going to is that the declaration page where it goes over the types of different coverages that you have and the different policy limits. So my response to that, I guess, would be twofold. First, make sure that you're looking at the proper document to see all the things. And you could call your agent too. Agents are supposed to be helpful in this and say, hey, look, I don't know what all coverage I have. Here's what's going on. Like, would there be coverage for that? And then secondly, I would just encourage the submitting of the claim and at least putting them on notice, because insurance companies love to say, well, gosh, gee shucks, if you had just told me about it earlier, I would have known. And the fact that you don't know what those losses are going to be, because obviously there are ongoing losses, that wouldn't prevent you from putting in a claim and starting the claims process. That would only slow down the end part of it where you actually get the check from the insurance company. So, you don't have to wait until all of your damages are in order to submit a claim. You let them know that you're being injured right now, and right now the order continues until the end of May. So you're like, well, look, I've already been injured here, and right now it's going to at least continue through May 30th, but and not to add doom and gloom on top of this, but the other thing that we all, I think, are starting to be aware of, it's not like we're going to be able to open back up for business the same way we were doing business before. And it's not like for restaurants, you're not going to be operating at full capacity. You're not going to be, maximizing, as you would say, that business. So the damage that we're going to feel from this, and the damage is going to be ongoing, but that wouldn't prevent you from at least starting the process.
Robert, I'm sure you are familiar with a number of states and a number of cities that are passing regulations, and actually there is an effort to have Congress enact similar legislation that they did after 9/11 with the terrorist activities, and have a combination of FEMA, government, and insurance companies provide business interruption. So, I mean, obviously, in our association, we passed a resolution last Wednesday recommending Congress to proceed with that. Do you see, or do you have any idea of what is happening with that area?
I don't. The most recent information I have was from the most recent conference that I was on, like this call-in thing with like the Newsom people, and all I know is that there were similar calls on the state level, and I'm not sure on the federal level what's going on, but there are calls on the state level for the state insurance commissioner to start getting involved and doing something very similar on the state side. But on the state side, like it seems to be the recurring theme is that, we'll push as much of this onto the federal government as we can. And then we'll do like gaps, anything that we're not getting from the federal government, we'll cover on the state side. But the only thing I can say is the most recent calls is there have been calls for the insurance commissioner to get involved and an understanding that this is an issue and something that needs to be addressed. But I haven't seen anything concrete come down. But these town halls and the calls that I'm doing, these are almost on like a daily, sometimes 3 times a day basis. And they're all types of them that are going on. So all I know is that there's a concern on this and that there's some pressure that that something be done, because insurers are not going to voluntarily just pay for the whole thing.
Do you know any
Robert,
of the cities? Do you happen to know any cities that have passed a resolution requesting Congress or any state governments to get involved?
I thought that there was something from Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, I think there might have been something. I was reading this morning, and I think like out of Brooklyn, you could look in there and like just Google like Brooklyn insurance, business interruption, and you might be able to pull up something on that.
Because I heard that San Francisco had passed something similar to that.
Don't know, but yeah, it's definitely something that you should be looking at. And the other thing is just be wary. There are a lot of people like in all types of downturns. There are all types of people that are looking for new revenue streams, and all I can say is that there's 1 million CLEs now, continuing legal educations on like business interruption insurance and these various things. And similarly, a lot of law firms that are out there promising, like, hey, sign up with us, and, for a contingency fee of 42%, will help you submit a claim to your business to get coverage under your business interruption insurance. So just be a wise consumer of legal services, I guess is what I would say.
Robert, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
No, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I know that they've announced, Newsom said that they're going to allow certain businesses to open, golf courses, nursery, et cetera. My business is not going to be classified anywhere with anything because I'm just a small, one-of-a-kind business. It's just watch repair. Is there any way I can find out? I mean, my store would be very easy to do the social distancing, the plexiglass, one person at a time. It'd be a very simple thing. Most people do just drop off and leave anyway. How I can find out if I can open?
Well, I'm glad that you raised that. I think it would be basically looking at the order and developing an argument. But I'm glad that you raised this issue because it was something under the new modified order where they're going to be releasing some of these restrictions. They say that you have to have like protocols in place. So you need to look at the newest like extension of that. And offline, by the way, if you need some assistance with that, I think I could help with that.
Thank
you. Part of it is that if you're going to reopen, then you need to have a plan. It's got to be posted. There are a bunch of requirements for reopening. So I'm glad that you mentioned it because it's not like for example, mine, I'm just like, essentially nowadays, it's just, I'm up on that second floor. I don't really take clients up there. It's just kind of a one-person thing. But I've had a question about whether or not I can even go in there, right? Because it's like I'm supposed to be sheltering in place, but I'm like, well, geez, I'm the only person there. Like nobody else is really there.
Exactly. Why can't you?
Yeah. So, I think it would be the language of the order you'd have to go to. You'd have to develop an argument. And then it would start with that protocol, you would have to have some kind of protocol for the distancing, and it's out there. And that's hard baked. That's part of the requirement.
Right. So I just need to look into the order itself. Just go on the internet and find it.
Yeah, I can direct you. I can direct you to it.
Okay, I'll talk to you about that later. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Who's on with us on this call?
Linda,
And then I
so-
think there's one last little thing, just because I see that we are starting to get at time. The practical advice, and I think we mentioned it earlier, but just to rope back on this, many contracts have alternative dispute resolution.
We got muted.
Robert, you froze.
Where are you?
It's probably hiccuping. He'll come back.
Before you trigger certain things. And like I was saying, litigation is expensive. Nobody wants to be there. And you're better with a negotiated resolution of that dispute than a litigated one, because it's very expensive. And then just one final little cautionary thing. There's a concept in contract law called anticipatory repudiation. If I just say, I'm not paying you a dime, for any of this, I'm not paying a dime, I'm not doing this. There's a concept called anticipatory repudiation, and essentially it's like, look, if somebody manifests a clear intent to breach obligations that they would otherwise owe under the contract, that in it of itself can be a breach that would give somebody a right to go in and say, well, look, they clearly manifested an intent to breach the contract. So usually courts are all about standing, and it's like, look, we don't issue advisory opinions. It's got to be a clear and actual dispute before you have it. So you need to be cautious in your communications with them. I mean, first of all, negotiate. If negotiation doesn't work, then maybe suggest like a non-binding kind of mediation. And like I said, the city, Maryland has talked a number of times about setting up some kind of mediation forum, commission, something like that, where businesses and landlords and other people can come together and sit down and try to resolve these disputes, where you would have, the mediator would have some information, they'd have the language of whatever the contract was, some kind of factual information, and then help the parties reach some kind of reasoned resolution of the dispute, short of filing a lawsuit. Because the other thing is, I did landlord-tenant law, both landlord side and tenant, long before this thing came around. And it's usually, down in Hayward, and it's the whole floor of a building, and it's standing room open only in the courtrooms, and it's standing room only even in the hallways. And I constantly tell landlords, if you think you're going to rush to court and, have everybody sit and listen to your case for 5 hours or whatever, that is not going to happen. And I anticipate that so what happened in the initial phase of this is the courts continued all the hearings, like until August. They just pushed everything out. There's going to be a huge backlog of cases within the court for all the hearings that should have taken place that couldn't take place because of the shutdown. And then there's going to just be an overwhelming sea of legal disputes coming to the courts who were already overstressed. So I think all of that argues for negotiating first, mediating, looking at your contract, seeing what kind of dispute resolution procedures you have in place.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Thank you, Robert. So I'm going to quickly unmute everyone so we have a final opportunity for any questions or comments, and then we appreciate your time, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're
Robert,
welcome.
I want to thank you also. This means a lot that you're there for us. These are things that we don't know about unless we have someone like you, and we obviously can't afford to pay for it. So thank you from my heart.
Oh, you're welcome. One quick note too, the city has, it's only going to help, 80 businesses, but they do have that grant program that they're talking about. And then it's May the 7th is the deadline. And the only other kind of like Q&A period they're going to have on it is May the 5th. So
How do you sign up for it?
if you go to the website, the City of Alameda, the COVID-19 section of it, there is a little space where you can just click on and start the application process. And basically you have until May 7th to get that submitted. And I think it's a $7,500. 67 businesses will get it kind of in the main aisle, and then 13 for Alameda Point.
Can I tag a little information on that?
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
So if and I'm sorry, Alameda Watch Hospital, I forgot your name.
It's Linda.
Linda, we're right
you.
down the street. We're Daisies.
What store are you?
Daisies, right
Oh,
by
yeah.
Tucker's.
I'm running out of juice here, so I'm going to plug in.
Okay. We hope to work with the other business associations and to do a fundraising effort that would add to that fund. But Robert's absolutely right that right now there's only a total of 80 businesses, and they're focusing on just what your revenues in March are. But they say that if like there's some businesses that got like a membership business, got fees and got paid in March and don't show a significant reduction, but April, they plummet. So if you don't have a huge drop in March, you can still give them the information about April to show that your revenues were down, and that would help. It's
Nice.
a little bit.
Okay, what was your name?
This is Ron.
Ron? Okay, I've probably seen you, just don't remember your name.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if the downtown has your email, we can send you the link to the city website so you can find it quicker.
Linda, I can send you those links.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Ron, tagging on that, I've seen a lot of people, they've been doing kind of like GoFundMes and various fundraising things for employees, but I would hope that if we do get opened up or something like that, that there could be something
because
that
so many sections.
That's more than just kind of an individual business type of thing, but something that's kind of something a little bit more broad.
Yeah, one of the things that sucks about this one is it really doesn't help the business owner itself, because it wants to see, are you reducing your wages? And if you're a sole proprietor, if you're, you and your husband work at a shop, you really don't have the things that the city wants to see. But we're going to try to make sure that really gets opened up for the one that we're going to fundraise for, because, we certainly, our employees, we want them to be healthy and safe and not lose dramatic money. But it's pretty hard to run a business if you can't have your normal draw or pay the rent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that is Ron, on that point, they exempted sole proprietors with no employees. So
that won't be in the
sole
second
proprietor
one.
with no employees, you're out on the grant program. And like I said, it's a very limited one anyway. So that sounds great. Keep me in the loop on that, because I definitely want to be involved.
Yeah, and Ron, if I can get your number or a way to get a hold of you, that'd be nice.
On the $7,500 grant, they already had over 140 applications. Yesterday, I emailed the city manager and some other people in the city about my idea that I mentioned to you before of raising city bond or having other kinds of funding to provide at least $10 to $15 million to provide loans for small business. I really believe that unless the small business have access to some kind of a loans in the next year, 25 to 30% of the business will close because the banks are not going to be providing any loans. Yesterday, Wells Fargo stopped accepting applications for equity lines of credit, and the banks are such that the minute you have the uncertainty, they are not going to provide, financing that any small business would require. So unless the city steps in, you are going to have a lot of failures.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and I think it's also similarly in this environment, because I've been talking about this a lot, from the landlord side of things. Who are you going to get, like in your rush to kick this person out for whatever reason? Who are you going to get in, right? And how, so I think there is this concept, and by the way, when I bring up this whole force majeure for some of the landlord people, they're like, well, hey, that's not fair. So like, we're going to have to shoulder, like all of this, like we're going to be the ones that lose out, like shouldn't be shared. So I think really the solution is going to be it's going to have to be some kind of shared pain, for lack of a better term. And community solutions, especially, I think that's one of the good things about being in Alameda is that it's smaller scale. And I think we could really concentrate and do things like that to try to address like our own individual needs on the island.
That'd be nice. I just wanted to ask Ron if I could share his phone number with him.
Sure.
Or if I could get it and give you mine.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I can write yours down because I can see it on my screen, but mine is 510-385-0725.
Nice. Thank you so much, Ron.
You're welcome.
So.
Okay, well, that's coffee talk.
Yeah.
That's coffee talk. It's been wonderful. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Went off like butter.
Who else do we have on the line with us?
Yeah.
Thanks, Robert.
So we
You're
have
welcome.
Robert, who else have we been talking to? Ron, got you.
And then Scott Herwihe. I'm doing a bad name on your name, Scott.
And
We must have lost him.
so, and then
He's over at the Hobnob. He owns the Hobnob.
Okay, gotcha.
Then John Frugalis with Park Street Tavern.
Okay,
I think those are probably the only voices you heard.
is that it?
We had Kristen from the karate school down the street from you, the West Wind Karate School.
Yep.
And I'm not sure where Shop or Zia is from.
Okay. All right. Well, I know those so far. All right, and you know me, so we need to stick together if we can. And
Yep.
my phone number, my cell phone number is 406-5868. 925 area code. 406-5868. So if anybody has any questions and we can hang out and chat, that would be great.
What was the number again?
It's 925-406-5868.
And Linda, since you're here in this session, I am assuming you're receiving all our emails?
Did I receive your email?
Yeah, this is how you found out about this through the emails we've been sending out?
Yes, I did, yes. I didn't I'm looking at my emails right now. I don't see it in there. At least it hasn't come through. You want my email again?
Oh, I was just confirming that you were on our email list for
Oh,
emails
yes.
we're sending out, like every
Yes,
few
I
days.
definitely am, because that's how I heard about this.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Take care. All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And
Bye,
everybody
everybody.
else, how's it going? All good?
We're hanging in there. I need to
Good.
get back to work, like today.
Yeah. Linda, there are, so you have a 925 area code. So are you not normally popping in Alameda recently?
You know, I do. I check my store because I put a note up that if anybody had, you know, an emergency or anything, they needed addressed right away to drop a note in my mailbox, and because I have a little slot, and then I go back there and check, and because I deal with a lot of the elderly and the handicap,
Right.
and I always do drop-offs and pickups anyway. So,
So
you know,
one of the businesses right down the street, literally, Island Prints, is
yeah.
giving out the posters that you have to put up in your store to allow
Oh,
people in. And
yes.
even though you can't use it right now legally,
Right.
you know, I would grab one of those from him. And if you need to, I can certainly walk by on one of my cookie walks.
Okay.
I
Now, is
like
this
to
Ron
pick
I'm
up
talking
cookies,
to?
but normally my dog goes for the walk, and her name is Cookie.
Oh.
So
Now, is this Ron?
yeah, this
Am
is
I
Ron.
speaking?
Sorry.
Okay, God. Okay, gosh, nice. Okay.
So I can pick one up and put it in your slot.
Oh, that would be awesome if you would. I mean, I'll probably go by there today or tomorrow, but yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah. So we hope that at the end of May they're going to start loosening restrictions. And as Robert said, you're going to have to fill out a little form. It's tedious, but basically it's like, how are you going to make sure that people that come into your store are not sick?
Well,
And
I'll take their temperature and ask
right,
them the same
exactly.
questions.
So
I'll
if we
do, you
have
know,
to do that, yeah, they'll be
yeah.
telling us that.
And my store is real easy to do this in because it's usually only one person at a time anyway. I
Right.
mean, you've seen my store; it's just a little tiny, and normally they're there for, you know, a very short period of time because a lot of my stuff is I need to look at it and take time, so they'll do a drop off and then I call them. My store would be so easy to open up.
Right.
And then a lot of my stuff is drop offs and pickups. I drive to their homes and pick it up because they can't get to me. And I mean, I'm feeling, I need the money, but I feel bad for my customers because they're so dependent on me.
Right.
And they're alone. And sometimes I'm just the only person they have to chit chat with, you know, and I bring my dog over that they love. And yeah, it's just.
Right. If you read the current one
sad.
that they order that they just put out this week, it actually has a line in there that says, this does not mean we're allowing curbside drop off. So that was disappointing to us.
Yeah.
But, you know, we are, of course, we're right now, literally, it should be a huge time of year for us. Mother's Day for a gift show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With the stuff you have in there. Oh, yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So we're doing a little bit of online sales. And if people text my bride and say, hey, you know, can my wife told me to check on you to see what I should get for Mother's Day. We're making deliveries, but I think technically that's against the rules. But we're kind of doing it.
You know, I know it's against the rules, but what are they going to do? I mean,
right.
They're going to give you a warning. They're not going to fine you. They'll tell you first. It's like the contractors that are coming to your houses. They're giving them warnings. So we got to do what we got to do, you know, and you're doing the best you can. You're getting creative.
Right. Actually, one of the things that kind of scared me, and we're lucky that I should say the bank, and we own our property. But, you know, restaurants, John, it was interesting what, Robert said, that you have a duty to try to do as much as you can to perform your contract, right? So, you have, if you can be open, you know, even if it's limited, it sounds like, you know, to defend not paying your full rent, you have to be able to say, well, I was open as much as the government allowed me to, and because of the rules, I only have, you know, 20% of the income, so I can pay you 20% of the rent or something like that. So that's.
Well, I mean, I'm not even worried about my rent because that's the first thing I want to pay because for 48 years I've been there, and Don Lindsay has been so good to me. He's the last person I want to hurt. So I'm not even worried about that. I'm just worried more about my
Customers.
My client customers. Yeah, I feel so bad. You know, I know who they are, and I still call and check on them. But
do you have, Linda?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What kind of business are you in?
Oh, it's watch repair. I repair watches.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's mostly old vintage timepieces that I do, but I do battery changes and bands and stuff like that. So, you know, right before all this came to a shutdown, I had two different customers call me and tell me, hey, I got some watches that need to get fixed. And I went and got them and got back there. I go, there's nothing wrong with their watches. I go, I know, but fix them anyway because I know you need the money. I mean, that's the kind of people they are. And they're, you know, they just love to chit-chat more than anything. I always say I'm going to start serving coffee in there because they'll just come in and just want to hang out and talk, which is fine because everybody knows everybody and we know everything about each other.
Right. That's so kind.
So
Great story, Linda.
anyway, I just hope I don't have to shut down. It's been 48 years and I just, not under these circumstances.
One thing that can definitely be done during this time, I was reading the articles about other retail shops that are opening up across the country and the protocols that are in place for them, for each of those states. You'll see some very good patterns in each of them of things that you can do in preparation for opening.
Oh, I'm totally prepared. Got the plexiglass ready, got the gloves, the masks. If they don't have them, I got extra. Yeah, I'm a retired surgical nurse, so I always kind of have that stuff around anyway. Yeah, so I think I'm prepared, and the sign's going to be great. Yeah, I've got all the hand sanitizing for me. You know, I don't want to be touching people's stuff either and getting it, so I'm prepared for that. And I've got gloves that fit, the surgical gloves, so they're really tight, so I can work on the watches. I'm going to really be a watch doctor now. I even got my stethoscope, so I'm prepared.
All right. Well,
but,
I'll stop by to have my temperature checked and my lungs and heart checked out.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many questions I get about medical issues in there. It's kind of funny. But now, who's the
on me,
female?
Linda. You're a hospital. Of course you can.
I know.
Yeah.
Really, huh? That's a necessity. I could play on that one. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can play on verbiage here. We can play on verbiage. We can do this. Who is the female that I'm talking to?
Hi, Linda. This is Stephanie. I work with the office there at the association. We've met some time ago.
Oh, you've come in my store. Yes. Yep. I think you took Rob Ratto's place?
No. I was just helping out in the interim.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was Rob and then Janet. But I've been there through Rob's era, through Janet's era.
Uh-huh.
And now through Kathy. Kathy, say hi.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. Linda and I talk. I can't wait to see your face sometime.
Oh, Kathy, you're on here too. Awesome.
I am.
You've helped me a lot. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes.
I do.
All right.
Well, I did get my.
Kathy, before we go, for a future webinar, one of the topics I think will be very important is for people who receive PPP loans to find out how the forgivable part of the loan will work. So if we have anybody that we can bring in to discuss the forgivable part of the loan, I think will be, an interesting topic.
I could probably check with somebody from Bank of Marin.
They don't know too much.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I've been talking with John actually, and I got, yesterday I got my loan funded. Didn't expect it that soon, but so now I have to go to work, but I can't bring anybody back because I'm not open. They don't allow me. So it's catch-22.
Okay, excuse me for interrupting. What was your name and what store do you have?
My name is John Frangoulis, and I have the Park Street Tavern, or my son has the Park Street Tavern.
Oh, okay, I know where that is. Gotcha. All right, perfect. Yeah, you sound like you've been doing a lot of research.
I like to know things.
Yeah. Well, we need to tap into you for a lot of stuff then. Thank you, John.
okay, this is Ron. I've got to drop off. I'll see everybody later.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I'm dropping off also. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks, Kathy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.